Hi, and welcome to my sci-fi, fantasy, and horror short fiction roundup covering stories I read and loved in both November and December of 2022. And happy holidays, whatever you're celebrating or not celebrating. I hope you're having a good holiday time. I'm going to dive right into the stories. So, my first story pick for this roundup is Our Heartstrings Howl the Moon by Eliana Castriani in Strange Horizons. And I'm going to quote the first line of the story. When we are kids, says Stavros, we eat the heart of a wolf and become half wolves ourselves. And I just love that line. And I love the story. It's a fierce, wild, devastating, gorgeously wrought short story about a pack of children who become wolves in order to survive the horrors of Greece's civil war after the Second World War. The story is written as a group of children telling us part of the story, of their story, of hunting together, of cold and starvation, of being taken away from their pack and friends and family, and in some cases to be remade into something else. I love how this story shows us children the way they are, not only victims or meek things, but young people finding their own way to make it through hard times. Castriani depicts the bleak and terrible moments of war and the bond of the wolves/children in fiercely sharp and beautiful prose. This is an outstanding piece of historical fiction threaded through with fairy tale and subtle magic. My next story pick is Plum Century by Simo Srinivas in Fantasy Magazine. And it starts out with this line. It takes the lieutenant 100 years to climb the hill to Lao Po's house. Now, Lao Po in the story is a sorceress, and the lieutenant has come to deliver a message to her from his superiors, but as it turns out, Lao Po's power works in a way that those around her don't quite understand, with consequences for everyone involved. I love this story for the delightful way that it twists a fairy tale trope into a new shape, and the way the characters defy the limitations and expectations we might have for them. I also love the subtle way the conversation between these two presumed enemies works to build a bond between them. This is lovely, beautiful, and incisively funny in every way. My next story is also from Fantasy Magazine, and it is The Typewriter by Z.K. Abraham. Zella can hear the typewriter next door while she tries to find a way to write her own story. She reflects on old photos and old memories and old family stories, but the sound of that typewriter haunts her and beckons to her. And when she meets the woman who is using the typewriter, things take a surreal turn. I love the quiet strangeness of the story, the way it reveals and obscures at the same time, and the way that we're slowly drawn into the enigmatic truth, perhaps, of what is happening here. My next story is He Stays Among the Comets by Christopher Rowe in Beneath Ceaseless Skies. I really like stories that take a well-worn familiar trope and stitch a new story from old threads. And here there are quests and battles, magic and destiny in the background, but none of those things turn out the way you might think. Rowe anchors his fantasy story beautifully in a place and a world that feels real and complex, tactile even. I really appreciate a story where the everyday world, with its seemingly non-epic quests, troubles, tribulations, and joys, is celebrated. And my next story pick is Sulta by James Bennett in the Dark. In this story, an ancient Norse goddess takes center stage, and it is an absolutely bone-chilling tale about a photographer trespassing at an ancient shrine in Norway. Bennett twists the horror up expertly here as the story plays out, both in the past, when Tate, the photographer, refuses to heed the warnings about the ancient site he has decided to visit, and the present, where Tate returns home with his camera and finds that while he might have left the ancient shrine, the goddess did not leave him. My next story pick is Fostering by Ray Naylor in Vice. This is a quietly heartbreaking science fiction story where the science sort of is right below the surface. You can feel its presence, but it's not the main focus of the story. Instead, Naylor leans into the emotional human side with a quietly devastating prose. The story's narrator fosters children, or rather, he fosters artificial humans who need to learn how to navigate life, emotions, and the responsibilities of how to move through the world. It's an incisive and deeply emotional story that will resonate with me for a long time. My next story pick is Ant Twin by Sean Noah in Nightmare. And I'll start with a quote. By weight, there are as many ants on Earth as there are people, which means logically that every person on the planet has an ant twin, made up of millions of specific ants who would all, if they could just get together in one place, weigh the same amount as each and every one of us. This idea is just so out there and so excellent. And it's such a beautifully creepy, crawly tale. It manages to be both intriguing, compelling, and chilling in a very small space. And now I'll be thinking a lot about ants. My next story pick is also from Nightmare magazine. It's Break the Skin If You Have To, and is written by Emma Osborne, Jess Essie, and Cadwell Turnbull. This is a zombie story, but with a difference. Here, the zombie is not a dead person come back to life to eat and kill others. Rather, the zombie is a woman who has been bound, forced to serve someone else by the use of terrible magic, which is, I guess, a more original type of zombie if you look at the actual lore behind it. But this is not just a zombie story, it's also a love story and a story of how difficult it can be to break free. I love the sensuous feel of the story and the way it vividly describes how this particular zombie, this woman, has been bound to one house, and the specific way in which the old magic keeps her bound, keeps her alive, keeps her tethered to that one place, even when those who bound her are long gone. And I also love the way that this forcible bond is interwoven with and challenged by a new bond, love. My next story pick is The Last Cold Place by Alice Toey in Flash Fiction Online. This is a love story, or maybe the end of a love story, and it plays out in one of the last cold places on Earth where scientists are doing research on glaciers and ice cores. Toei quietly and skillfully brings together the outside world and the emotional drama within, and the ending is brilliant. My next story pick is Patterns in Stone and Stars by M.V. Meltzer in Giganotosaurus. This is a gripping story of first contact, which is set in a spacefaring universe where war and conflict loom large, and where prejudices and colonialism taint almost every interaction. Zgasi is a scientist from a minority group who has joined the military rather than pursue an academic career. Her path has never been an easy one, and now she's tasked with trying to figure out if a mysterious native species living on a planet of great strategic importance qualifies as an intelligent life form or not. Her decision will have major political and personal repercussions, and there are no easy answers to be had. Zgasi must confront complex personal, political, and scientific issues without losing herself. And I love the description of the mysterious aliens in the story. There's a scene when we first see them feeding that is pure sci-fi magic. And I also love how each strand of this tale works together with the others to form a compelling tapestry. My next story pick is Last Stand of the East 12th Street Pirates by L.D. Lewis in Lightspeed magazine. In the not-so-distant future, perhaps, in a city dealing with the rising waters brought by climate change, small and big battles are taking place everywhere, including in the flood district where Dee and Bobby are delivering packages to residents. Amazon is there too, of course, well-funded and eager to defend its shipments from the local pirate crews, so-called. Lewis takes you right into this world, this place, this city, this neighborhood, and into the lives of the characters. And every facet of the story feels alive and compelling. I love the way Lewis makes everyday problems, joy, struggles, fights, and relationships the heart of the story. And the writing just makes everything pop off the page. It's a true science fiction gem. It's well worth checking out the author spotlight at Nightmare 2, and the link is provided in the text version of this roundup. My next story pick is The Cat of Lynn Villa by Megan Chi at Cast of Wonders, and it's narrated by Su Ling Chan. This is told from the point of view of a very particular cat, and it blends myth and fairy tale brilliantly. The cat deals with desires and powers of all sorts, trying to solve a painful situation at Lynn Villa and an inconvenient problem for the cat. And it tries to solve this problem, maybe to help the human involved, but also to make sure that the cat doesn't lose its beloved creature comforts. I just adore everything about this story, particularly the ornery and self-involved voice of the cat as narrator. If ever a story captured the vibe of a cat, this is it. My next story pick is The Warrior Tree by Chana Cole in Luna Station Quarterly. And I love this story. It's about Faiza, who fights her whole life to be allowed to be herself, to do the things she wants, to get the kind of life she would like to live. Her physical disability, ectrodactyly, or a deformity of the fingers and hands, makes people see her and treat her in ways she cannot control and profoundly dislikes. Even so, she finds ways to go her own way. The ending took me by surprise in the best kind of way. My next story pick is The Mages of Biker by Kim Dane and Hexagon Magazine. Two mages in Newcastle, David Bright and Terry Blake, used to be inseparable, but now they are fighting each other, causing all sorts of disturbances and mischief in the streets and alleys and metro stations and elsewhere. Anna Sullivan, who knows both of them and has some serious magic of her own, is now sitting in a particular carriage on the metro with a plan to sort it all out, or maybe cause an even bigger rift, depending on how things go. This is such a wonderful urban fantasy story with magic in the metro and scarves and pigeons and chewing gum. And this entire issue of Hexagon Magazine is well worth a read. My next story pick is Verdandi of the Present by Liv Strum in Hexagon Magazine, also Hexagon Man. And as someone who is obsessed with Norse mythology, the story is a real treat. The Norns are living regular, separate lives in the regular, everyday world until a death brings them together. Is it the start of Ragnarok? That's what they have to figure out, and what happens next will take them on a wild ride that includes some well-known monsters from mythology and even a Valkyrie. Excellent storytelling from start to finish. My next pick is Pleiades by Wesley Wolfe in the Deadlands. And this story is haunting and mesmerizing from start to finish. It's dark and it's enigmatic and it's utterly captivating. The prose has the texture and flow of poetry as the story is told. There is a mystery being wound and unraveled, a place and a time, something that happened or must happen. And the main character wanders in and out of the story as it is being told. For some reason, this story reminded me of Alan Garner's book, Redshift, which is a book that I love, where there are points of connection, of living and reliving, playing out again and again. Very much worth your time to read. My next story pick is The Call of the Void by Tyler Heen in the Deadlands, and this is a nonfiction piece. And all my picks for this month, a lot of them anyway, seem to lean into uncanny, weird, strange territory. And Heen's nonfiction piece stays true to that theme, leaning into the void into that feeling of wanting to step into nothing, to fall, to crash, to disappear into the dark. There's an emotional honesty here, a feeling of peeling back the layers of what we would like to think we are, what we would like others to think we are, scratching away until something, be the truth, appears. My next story pick is The Healer by Jennifer Marie Brissett in Apex Magazine. And oh my goodness, this story winds and loops and did an absolute number on my brain and my heart as I read it. But the devastation, that hits in the final paragraph. A brother is caring for his sister after something terrible happened to her. He ends up connecting with a very peculiar healer. And what comes next, I'm just going to say it has to be read rather than described. I love stories that tie my mind in knots like this, especially when the underlying emotional truths and the complexity of the relationships are as powerful as they are here. My next story pick is not a brand new story. It's Bloodbath, VHS 1987, Director Unknown by David Demchuk in the anthology Alternate Planes. And I want to bring this story up because I moderated a panel that included David Demchuk at AugerCon, and I read this story right before we did that panel, and I have to share it. So I love found footage horror, and here Demchuk tells a found footage horror story that is downright terrifying. At the flea market, Jenny and her cousin Lana pick up an old horror movie on VHS, and when they watch it, Jenny's world begins to turn inside out and upside down. Something about the movie is too familiar, even though she has never watched it before. The people, the house, everything. Demchuk unravels it all slowly and with precision, and I love how reality twists into nightmare for Jenny, and how even small details from the beginning of the story are revealed to have a much greater meaning once you get to the end. So this is from the anthology Alternate Planes. It's a great anthology too, so well worth a read. And that was all my story picks for this roundup. Thanks so much for listening, reading, and I'll see you again in the new year.